Hey, Warpug. So I wanted to check something out here when I saw it pop up on my feed. I am a fan of the Critical Drinker. If you've never heard of him, he's a Scotsman, and he reviews movies. And every once in a while, he talks about a particular movie that had an absolutely miserable time getting off the ground, getting anything going. I first found out about this series when he talked about The Island of Dr. Moreau, which, for me, when I first watched it, I was like, what in the world am I looking at? This looks like the biggest piece of crap I've ever seen before in my life, and I wasn't that far off, considering the amount of problems that went into that, they had during production and everything like that. But I didn't know Alien 3 was like that. I knew The Abyss was like that just because, one, James Cameron, and two, just the sheer difficulties that they had because it was filmed in my home state. But Alien? Oh boy. Alien 3 was apparently a misery. And we're about to find out why. Guys, I actually liked Alien 3. I know some people didn't like it too much, but I know I really hated the way that they introduced it. Okay, so Newt's dead. The guy that was supposed to, the Marine that she liked got killed. And now we're just here. It was kind of ridiculous. But, guys, let's jump in. I still like the dog alien. I don't care. I liked it. I'll leave it at that. Let's jump into it. Warpugs. Production hell for Alien 3. All the Critical Drinkers links are in the description down below. Please go check him out. Let's get into it.
Now, these days it's practically become the norm for modern day sequels to erase, undermine, or otherwise destroy the achievements of their predecessors, undoing years of hard work and fan goodwill with a bunch of idiotic decisions that are so bizarre it's hard to even understand the thought process behind them. But back in the early 90s, stuff like that was still pretty rare. That is, until Alien 3 chest-bursted its way onto the scene. Or Alien Cubed. I don't know, I've never really understood the typeface for that one.
Okay.
Anyway, the point is that the third entry in the Alien franchise has become pretty infamous and controversial for all the creative decisions that were made, although considering the nightmares that awaited this franchise in the decades ahead, this thing is practically Citizen Kane by comparison.
I'll do the fingering.
But the story behind the making of this film is even more controversial and dramatic than the movie itself. A story of corporate greed, endless interference, creative deadlocks, and disputes so extreme that they caused the director to publicly disown his own movie. In short, Alien 3 truly was production hell.
Okay.
So, let's learn about it and embark on this journey together, shall we?
Let's go.
The success of James Cameron's Aliens convinced Fox that there was still plenty of life left in the Alien franchise, and more importantly, plenty of money still to be made. By 1987, it was unanimously agreed that a third...
Okay. Can we all agree she's a badass? Can we all agree that?
Alien movie needed to be made, and preferably soon, to capitalise on the momentum of the second movie. The only fly in the ointment here were Brandywine Productions, the company who actually owned the screen rights to the Alien franchise. They were keen to avoid just doing another conventional sequel and wanted to broaden the scope of the whole Alien universe with something bigger and much more ambitious.
Okay.
Their plan was to film two movies back to back, featuring an epic confrontation between the Weyland-Yutani Corporation and a faction of space communists who want to weaponize the aliens against them. And if you're able to spot the subtle allegories for the actual Cold War that was going on in the real world, then congratulations, Captain Obvious. Here's your degree in media literacy so you can go on to become a pretentious arsehole YouTuber making 10-hour-long video essays about the philosophical undertones of the Powerpuff Girls. Anyway, the first movie would focus more on the character of Hicks, with Ripley relegated to a minor cameo appearance. And believe it or not, this actually suited Sigourney Weaver, who was still mad at the studio for cutting out major portions of Ripley's backstory in Aliens, and was becoming increasingly tired of the role and worried about typecasting. The intention was to have Ridley Scott direct both movies, but he was busy working on Black Rain at the time and so wasn't available. Instead, Rennie Harlin was approached to direct, and cyberpunk author William Gibson was hired to write the script. Unfortunately, the studio were unhappy with the finished product, feeling like it was too conventional and action-heavy, and when Gibson was asked to rewrite it, he decided to leave the project altogether. Ironically enough though, his original script has gone on to develop a strong following online and has even been turned into an audiobook, with many people considering it superior to the finished movie.
Okay.
What might have been. With Gibson out of the way, Rennie Harlin suggested cult horror writer Eric Red as a replacement. Red struggled to come up with a new concept, and frustrated by constant studio meddling, he also bailed on the project after a couple of months, later describing it as the one script I completely disown because it wasn't my script. It was the rushed product of too many story conferences and interference with no time to write, and it turned out utter crap. David Twohy was next in line to take a crack at it, but unfortunately for him, real-world events had overtaken the project. The fall of the Soviet Union made the Cold War in space concept obsolete, so Twohy instead decided to set his script on a prison planet where the aliens were being used in biological warfare experiments. The studio were also getting cold feet on doing an Alien movie without Ripley and decided that she needed to be front and center again, which led to a pretty tense call with Sigourney Weaver, who finally agreed to come back on the condition she got paid $4 million, which was actually a pretty hefty amount back then, and that the script wouldn't have any guns in it.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man.
Jesus, way to suck the fun out of things, Sigourney. By this point, Rennie Harlin was getting bored and pissed off with the constant changes and delays, and walked out of the project, leading the studio to replace him with New Zealand director Vincent Ward. Ward's new idea was for Ripley's escape pod to crash land on a prison monastery planet made entirely out of woods. Not entirely sure how he imagined that one working out, but whatever. The movie would have had heavy religious overtones and have been much more character-driven, focusing instead on Ripley and her relationship with the alien. The studio were either impressed enough or desperate enough to greenlight his idea, and pretty soon, Ward got to work. Unfortunately, the boys at Brandywine were increasingly uneasy about Ward's plan, and their pessimism soon spread to the Fox executives as well, with John Landau describing it as more on the artsy-fartsy side than on the big commercial side. Ward was summoned to their head offices and given a list of demands to rewrite the script, which he promptly rejected. And funnily enough, he was fired soon after. By now, it was 1990. They'd been slogging away at this fucking thing for 3 years, and they had nothing to show for it but a trail of aborted scripts. Running out of time, the executives at Brandywine ended up rewriting the script themselves by merging together elements of Twohy and Ward's pitches into something that mostly resembled the final products. It was still unfinished at the time, and nobody was especially happy with it, but it was...
That is never a good way to really set off to do anything. Not when you're dedicating that much money and time.
It was the best they had, and so there was no choice but to just go with it and hope for the best.
Not a great plan.
David Fincher, who at the time was best known for directing music videos, was approached to direct. He was already a massive fan of the Alien franchise, and well, you can't exactly blame the guy for signing on. But it would be a decision that would end up haunting him for the rest of his career. Production finally got underway at Pinewood Studios in January 1991, and pretty soon, any enthusiasm that Fincher might have had for the project evaporated once it became clear the studio were going to be heavily involved. Unwilling to trust such an inexperienced director with a $60 million movie, they instead tried to micromanage every aspect of the production.
They say that, I hear him say that, and I just watched Snow White burn $300 million like it was nothing. I know, I'm listening to what he's saying. I still like the movie. You're allowed to like things that are bad.
production, leading to constant clashes and an increasingly toxic atmosphere on set. Fincher's original vision for the film was gradually diluted and cut by an interference studio that couldn't seem to quite decide what they wanted. As they became increasingly fixated on the budget, Fox began panicking and making cuts. The shooting schedule was reduced from 93 to just 70 days, and the number of special effects shots were cut in half. The tighter schedule meant cast and crew were forced to work much longer hours, 6 days a week, often having to cut corners to make their deadlines, and inevitably, accidents were bound to happen. At one point, a pyrotechnic device backfired during a big action scene, causing severe burns for several people in the vicinity and shutting down production while one crew member was rushed to hospital. All wasn't exactly going well on the effects side of things either. Fincher wanted this version of the alien to be much more fast and agile than the men in rubber suits we'd seen in the previous movies, but since CGI wasn't up to the task at the time, they had to find another solution. And I'm not gonna lie, some of the shit they tried was just batshit insane. Like gluing a bunch of rubber alien prosthetics to a fucking dog and having it run around the set. Needless to say, the results were suboptimal at best. I mean, just look at this thing. It's almost as bad as the original Predator suit.
He's still a good boy.
Finally, though, the team came up with an unusual combination of miniature puppets mounted on rods and cables manipulated by several crew members that was shot doing various actions and then composited into live-action footage to produce the final sequences. I mean, it was definitely fast and agile, that's for sure, but it also looks like complete dog shit. It's horribly fake and jerky and dated in a way that the other movies never were. And
now that I'm looking at it, he's talking about it. Yeah, I can see it.
in some ways, I think it's actually a perfect metaphor for what Alien 3 was. A cheap, nasty and tacky addition to a once great franchise that's aged way worse than its predecessor who came out more than a decade earlier. Alien 3 finally released in May 1992 to mixed reviews, going on to make about $160 million worldwide against a $60 million budget, considered by most people to be kind of a disappointment. The decision to kill off all the major characters from the previous movie also prompted a big backlash, and I'm not gonna lie, to this very day it still leaves a sour taste in my mouth. David Fincher himself was so disillusioned and disgusted by the experience that he publicly disowned the film and refused to have any further participation, even refusing to help out when Fox decided to put together a director's cut for home media. The assembly cut, as it became known, restored about 30 minutes of cut footage and helped to fix a few of the major plot holes, but ultimately even that couldn't change the fact that Alien 3 is a relentlessly grim, bleak, mean-spirited and visually depressing movie that I never have the slightest inclination to rewatch. Ultimately, I think Sigourney Weaver herself best summed up the experience of making this film when she spoke about it in 2006.
Okay.
What was ironic was that Fox chose David Fincher, who was so talented, and from the second he got on the job, they undermined him by not giving him what he asked for. For me, it was a real education on how not to make a movie.
Ooh.
Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
To be quite honest, I liked Alien 3. I always have liked Alien 3. But now that I hear how many problems there were behind the scenes, how much strife there was, how just screwed up this was, it makes me wonder if the studio hadn't gotten involved, if the studio had let the filmmaker do what he wanted to do, how much better could this have been overall? I had always assumed that the reason that the alien looked that way was because of a new way of doing graphics, but I never thought that they were using puppets. It didn't even look like a puppet to me. It really didn't even look like a puppet. But now that I think about it, but I still like it. I still like elements of it. If you watch it as a standalone, you have to see it as a standalone, because Hicks dying and Newt dying at the front of the movie is just, that really sucked. And I think the main reason I like it more than anything else is the same reason that, Pointless Hub likes some Roland Emmerich movies. It is because of the sheer fact that this was when I was young. This was when I was, This was when I was young. I was watching this movie. It was cool. It had aliens. It had a whole bunch of... And it had some of the best quotes I've ever heard, flat out. And not the ones you're thinking about. It's when the guy screamed out after the dude that was, God, what was it? The warden probably got ate up there by the alien. But never mind. I'm an idiot. Don't worry about me. But this Alien 3 is, it's one of those movies that I just remember from my youth. And yeah, I might like it because of pure nostalgia reasons for this being from my youth. But I can see so many of the things that he's talking about now in terms of of how this was a sign of things to come further on down the line. And the sheer fact of the matter was they tried to turn this into a franchise even back then. That's sad. I always thought that the next Alien movie on the list really made things, suck. But maybe I need to go back and rewatch this. Just to see if it's as good as I remember. Because I haven't watched it in years. But, like I said, my view was probably tainted by bias brought on by nostalgia. But I can admit when something's bad. Just like Independence Day. Independence Day is a campy piece of crap, but I still like that movie because I watched it in the theater when I was a teenager. There you go. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Aliens 2 is still the best out of the bunch. I'd say this is the third best Alien movie that has been made, including Alien vs. Predator and all the subsequent movies thereafter. Let me know what you think, though, in the comments down below. I'm going to head out of here. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will catch you guys next time. Head on by the merch store, get yourself a shirt. Join as a member of Patreon for early access. Later, guys.